Sorry. Again, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last Infrastructure and Land Use Committee meeting of the year for the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. I'm Brian Levine with the Chamber, and as we do for all of our committee meetings, we are recording this one, so please note that. And Gus and Bob, if I can, just a quick advertisement. We have one more committee meeting this year. Will, we have three committees. We have this one, we have Economic Development Committee, and we have a Legislative Affairs Committee. Our Legislative Affairs Committee is meeting on Thursday at 8:30 for our last meeting of the year, and that is now our annual preview of 2024 and what priority policy issues we have to deal with next year, and that's going to feature John Steeroff here from Venable, and also our local lobbyist, Ashley Bagwell from Harris Jones Malone, looking into their crystal ball. Please note, those Legislative Affairs Committee meetings will become weekly during the legislative session of the General Assembly like they always are. So that's our first weekly meeting of that committee is January 11th, and it runs through mid-April. Let me pass it along to our chair and our co-chair of this committee, our Infrastructure and Land Use Committee, Gus Bauman and Bob Elliott.
Thank you, Brian. This is Gus Bauman at Beveridge and Diamond. Want to welcome everyone to this month's committee meeting, and especially our guest, Will Pines. As this meeting will run to 10:30 maximum, and as always, we will hear from our speaker and then take comments and questions, which Brian will moderate. We look forward to this discussion with Will. And also what we will do, as always, is make this as efficient as possible, given the time frame, so that Brian, if you could, working with everyone who's attending the meeting, for quick introduction of everybody, so everyone can know who's here, and especially so that Will can know who is here. And let me turn this over to Bob Elliott, our co-chair.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Before we do go around on introductions, just a brief background on Will. Will is currently the State Highway Administrator for the state of Maryland. He is responsible for 3,000 people, 26 offices, 7 districts, 28 maintenance shops, 5,200 miles of roadway, 17,000 miles of non-toll road, and 2,500 bridges. Obviously, he's got a lot of priorities for us here in Montgomery County. I think one of which is ultimately going to be what happens with the express lanes here and the bridge and what have you. Will has basically spent most of his career working with the state of Maryland. I think he's been working for the state of Maryland for 19 years. He's worked his way up from SHA intern to up to administrator. He's taken on roles as executive director, chief operating officer, and chief engineer. He is very obviously highly accredited. At one point, I think he's been to AASHTO's National Transportation Leadership Group. He's won multiple awards within the state, and he has a civil engineering degree from the University of Maryland at College Park and a master's also from the University of Maryland's Global Campus. So we'll look forward to hearing from Will here in a minute. But before I give it to Brian to do the introductions, one thing, we will put most people on mute for the call. And if you have a question for us, please, I think it's under reactions, click the button down there and raise your hand, and then we will know to call on you at the end when Will's done with his remarks. So with that, Brian, perhaps you can go around and call on people to briefly introduce themselves.
Yeah, let's start with our president and CEO of the Chamber. Sounds like an introduction already. Gigi, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Gigi Godwin. I'm President and CEO of the Chamber. And Secretary Pines, we are thrilled to have you with us this morning. Our Chamber has a long and successful story in advocating for transportation. We are practically the Chamber of Transportation, as I'm sure you're aware. And so we're looking forward to working with you. We certainly have our challenges ahead, but we're really happy to have you in the driver's seat for the State Highway Administration. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, I'm just going to go around as they appear on my screen. Bob and Gus have introduced themselves. Liz, you're next.
Great. Good morning. I'm Liz Rogers, a land use attorney with Lark, Turley & Brewer. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Liz. Derek?
Good morning, everybody. Derek Gunn, with the State Highway Administration. I'm the District 3 engineer.
Thanks for joining us, Derek. Stuart?
Morning, everyone. Stuart Barr. I'm also land use and zoning attorney with Lurch, Early and Brewer, a law firm in Bethesda, and great to hear from everyone this morning. Thanks for joining us.
And Will, we have a bunch of our board members joining us today. The first one is Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Good morning, Scott Wallace. I'm a land use attorney with Miles and Stockbridge in Rockville.
And our featured speaker for our Thursday Legislative Affairs meeting, John Steerhoff. Go ahead, John.
Morning, everybody. John Steerhoff. I'm a lawyer at Venable LLP.
Next, Will, someone everyone knows, the Honorable Bill Frick.
I don't know about everybody, but thanks, Brian. I'm Bill Frick, longtime state delegate from Montgomery County, now in private practice, volunteer president of the Gigi Godwin fan club. So that's helpful.
Charter member. Nicole, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Nicole Wojciechowski, Chief of Staff at SHA.
Another one of our guest speakers for Thursday, Chuck.
Good morning, everyone. Chuck Connor, an attorney at Venable.
Bill, co-chair of our Legislative Affairs Committee.
Good morning, everybody. Bill Wishman, General Counsel with Kaiser Permanente Mid-Atlantic States Market.
Mel.
Good morning, Mel Toll with Lee Development Group in downtown Silver Spring. And you'll hear a lot about Silver Spring and the Purple Line.
Another board member, Mike. Mike Schwartz. Yep, there you are.
Hey, sorry. Nice to meet
Mike.
you all. Commercial banker, C&I lending at Eagle Bank. Looking forward to the conversation.
Stephen.
Good morning, Stephen Davis, commercial banker with Burke and Herbert out of Bethesda. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Next is Neil.
Hey, good morning. My name is Neil Blanc. Oops, there's my camera. I work at Rogers Consulting, and I was extended an invitation from Mr. Casey Anderson. So happy to be here and excited for the conversation.
Yeah, all members and their employees, of course, feel free to forward the invitations. All members, that is everyone at the company that is a member, are welcome to come to any of our committee meetings. Next is John. Hey, John Underlin. John Underlin with Purple Line Transit Partners. Oh,
good morning, everyone.
I got you, John.
Slow on the camera there. Among other transportation projects. Hello, Will. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, John.
And Steve Robbins. Hey, Steve.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Robbins. I'm also a land use and zoning attorney with the law firm of Lurch, Early and Brewer and a former chair of the chamber. It's great to be here, and Will, thank you for being here and speaking with us today. Really appreciate it.
Your last four, Belinda.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Belinda Allen, CEO of True to Fitness Health, and I'm happy to be here to learn more. Thank you.
Thanks, Belinda. Tammy. Good morning, Tammy. That is Tammy Watkins from a little boutique company called Comcast. Susan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Susan Madden from Montgomery College. Thanks for being here today.
And Will, last but not least, Feezy. Are you there, Feezy?
I am. Good morning. Feezy Halim, also from Montgomery College. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more about what's going on in the world. Thank you.
And there's a note from Tammy saying sorry, but did I miss anyone? Don't think I did. Okay.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Will, just so you know, before you launch into your remarks, as Gigi indicated, this chamber and this committee, we have been deeply involved for decades in the missions of MDOT, certainly the SHA side, as well as the transit side. So we have been deeply involved over decades, and we look forward to hearing your comments, and thank you. It's yours, Will.
All right. Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. As was mentioned, for the record, my name is Will Pines, and I'm administrator of Maryland State Highway Administration. And they introduced themselves, but just again, for the record, I'm joined today by our district engineer, Derek Gunn, who is really instrumental and helps me so much in Montgomery County with meeting the many constituent needs for the county. And also I'm joined by my chief of staff, Nicole Wojciechowski, who helps a lot on the legislative side as well. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I'm really happy to talk about some of the great things that we're doing at SHA. So the Moore administration has been clear about our priorities and goals for Maryland transportation right from the beginning. We've been emphasizing several key areas. One, safety is really our top priority. That's reflected from the beginning and all the way even up as we've been talking about the most recent fiscal challenges that the state's facing. We're also preserving the investments we've made in our existing system, and we share the Chamber's values that advancing infrastructure increases economic competitiveness while connecting Marylanders to opportunities and especially jobs. We're also, through those efforts, making Maryland the greenest state in the country, and we'll do it with transparency with our partners in the community. At MDOT, we're committed to providing safe, equitable, environmentally sustainable transportation system that's accessible to all users, no matter which mode of transportation and travel that they select. At SHA, it's critical that we continue to expand our modal options by building out our existing facilities that are also focused on meeting the needs of our most vulnerable users, and that's pedestrians and bicyclists. Why is this so critical? Well, sadly, our current projections are showing that by the end of this year, there will be over 600 deaths on Maryland roadways, and approximately 1/4 of those will be vulnerable user deaths. And so we need to have a shift. And to achieve our vision, our Vision Zero goal, we must strategically invest in improving safety and especially vulnerable user safety. At the same time, this will also best position us to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals and be a leader in the transportation community when it comes to environmental stewardship. Connecting our transportation facilities and building a true multimodal system will benefit our economy and the community as we develop across the state. In addition, we must continue to invest in system preservation programs and prioritizing maintaining our physical infrastructure so that we have a state of good repair throughout our existing system. Of course, we could not do this without the assistance and support of our local, state, federal, and industry partners. And so I want to thank the Chamber. I've heard all the comments already about the advocacy that you have for strong infrastructure in Maryland, and that's really critical. And we want to ensure that we work closely with all stakeholders to deliver critical transportation projects and do so by prioritizing public engagement processes through all stages of our project development. So a little bit about me. So under my leadership, SHA is driven by Governor Moore's vision for our state. We're also focused on elevating a few key areas. I've asked the SHA team to focus on project delivery, permit approvals, and procurement timelines, and make changes where there are opportunities to streamline our processes while still continuing to do good business and maintain ethics in our behaviors. This will focus both on delivering projects faster and conducting timely reviews for county and developer-led projects and permits. We know that our mutual successes are important, and so that we want to both help ourselves and help others. We're establishing better business practices and internal performance tracking, as well as updating strategic enhancements to the SHA project portal website to ensure that our customers are getting updated information about the various types of projects that impact their community. We recognize that when SHA is operating efficiently and functioning at a high level, our partners see positive impacts throughout the community. Not only is it our job to keep customers safe when they're out actively using our system, but we must also be able to provide a high level of customer service to ensure that they're having a positive experience when they're traveling with us. That can include everything from inquiring about a project update to submitting a service request ticket. And so in addition to expanding opportunities with the SHA project portal, our team is also looking at ways to enhance our customer care management system to ensure that we provide good customer service. And finally, I've tasked our team with the ambitious but achievable workforce development goals. We've met the governor's goal to build back our workforce, reducing our vacancy rate from 12% at the beginning of the year to now we're at 5.5%. Hiring everybody from engineers to maintenance workers, mechanics, and so many more is positioning us to deliver critical services a lot better. And now my vision is to take that to the next step where we train and develop this new SHA workforce to be the next generation of leaders in the transportation industry. The decisions we make have a direct impact on communities that we are here to serve. And so through various training, professional development, and recruitment strategies, I'm encouraged that we're attracting bright and talented professionals to deliver on our vision for Maryland. I'm happy to report a number of our successes, and specifically the successes we've had with major projects in Montgomery County over the past year. We recently completed the Brookville bypass, which included the construction of a 2-lane highway with bicycle-compatible shoulders, the construction of 2 new bridges, 2 single-lane roundabouts, which improved traffic flow, and ultimately safety in Brookville. In October, SHA hosted an event where the facility was dedicated to the longtime advocates, former State Senator Karen Montgomery and former Brookville Councilman Clyde Unglesby. During this event, Lieutenant Governor Miller was in attendance, where she spoke to the crowd about the tireless advocacy and the significance of the project to the well-being of the community. Additionally, SHA's I-270 Innovative Congestion Management Plan was awarded the Best TSMO, or Transportation Systems Management and Operations Project of 2023 by the National Operations Center of Excellence. This project focuses on the use of ramp metering to help reduce congestion along the busy 270 corridor. The system uses sensors that detect real-time traffic conditions and activates signals on the on-ramps to control how traffic merges onto 270 more efficiently. SHA's already made and continues to pursue critical vulnerable user safety improvements across our state. Here in Montgomery County, those improvements include 2 miles of bike lanes installed on Old Georgetown Road between South 495 and Nicholson Lane, and the installation of a new signalized intersection at Maryland 124 at Pierpoint Place in Gaithersburg. This project includes a high visibility crosswalk, ADA compliant ramps, and provides accessibility to nearby transit facilities. Currently, the team is working on the Maryland 190 corridor safety study, which is evaluating potential improvements to pedestrian and bicyclist safety along the corridor. We also announced that we're moving forward with the design of the New Hampshire Avenue, or Maryland 650, design for our pedestrian safety action plan, or what we refer to as the PSAT plan, for those 23 corridors throughout that are part of our highest safety needs. So this one location is one of those 23 highest safety priority corridors in the state, and our plan is to advance safety on all of these corridors statewide. In the past 12 months, SHA has installed over 30 new leading pedestrian interval signalized intersections across the county. This improvement allows pedestrians to enter the crosswalk safely before vehicles are given a green light to proceed. We've also made several upgrades to high visibility crosswalks and will continue to do so programmatically. We have also completed several resurfacing projects across the county as part of our system preservation efforts, and these include US 29 from St. Andrews Way to Stewart's Lane in Silver Spring, and Maryland 108 and Only, and also included sidewalk and drainage improvements within that project. And while SHA is not the project lead, we also are assisting the Purple Line team with addressing community needs as they develop and are associated with that project. I want to talk a little bit for a moment about some of the grants that have happened around the county. This past month, or last month, Governor Moore announced more than $25 million in federal and state grants for 40 bicycle, pedestrian, and trail projects across Maryland. Examples of that include through our recreational trails program, $45,000 was awarded to the Northwest Branch Boardwalk project. Throughout the Transportation Alternatives program, $224,000 was awarded for the Fleet and Monroe Complete Streets project. $679,000 was awarded for the Forest Glen Road sidewalk, and $400,000 was awarded to complete a 10-foot wide ADA bicycle link from Industrial Drive to West Deer Park Road. Additionally, through the MDOT Kim Lanphier Bikeways Network program, $88,000 was awarded to the city of Rockville for a feasibility study and preliminary design for bicycle facilities along Halpine Road and East Jefferson Street. Additionally, $465,000 was awarded to the Metropolitan Branch Trail for final design. And last but not least, $176,000 was awarded to Gaithersburg for final design of the I-270 National Institute of Standards and Technology shared use path. So as you can see, we've been really busy working with the county on advancing grant opportunities, and those are paying great fruits for the county to be able to move projects forward. Now for an update on one of the major projects. A few months ago, Governor Moore also announced the submission of a federal grant application to address mobility and accessibility challenges on the American Legion Bridge, I-495 and I-270 corridor. MDOT recently hosted 4 open house meetings across the county to engage the community and stakeholders in the planning process and to receive feedback on potential multimodal solutions for the corridor. We're currently working to summarize that feedback, but here's kind of the big picture. So there are a few points that most folks that I've encountered, at least, and that many of our participants encountered, agree on. One, there's near universal support that there be some kind of strong bike pedestrian amenity across the Potomac River that connects to the existing trail networks in the region. Two, there is a recognition that the bridge is aging and we need to take care of maintaining our existing infrastructure. And three, there needs to be better transit across the river, with the minimum solution being fast and convenient bus transit. On this last point, the viability of fast and convenient bus transit relies on a lane that allows buses to move where the existing lanes are too congested to be able to accommodate that. And so there are admittedly a few calling for the existing lanes to be prioritized for buses, which would exacerbate the existing congestion for the region. But most understand that some form of widening will be necessary to provide the most desired amenities while we deal with the aging bridge. So those are the points of broad agreement. You know, we want bike and pedestrian accommodations, we want fast, reliable transit, and we want to deal with our aging infrastructure. We most tend to agree on that. What's changed on the program? We've listened to the feedback from the public and our elected leaders and have deprioritized work in the Rockville area. The planned project has been truncated to the limits between the George Washington Parkway and the 495-270 spur. This keeps us out of that Rockville area where there have been the most objections and focuses us on the area with the greatest need, which ultimately is replacing that aging bridge. We've also started the 270 North multimodal study. In contrast to those challenges that I talked about in Rockville, we understand that there is support from the Upper Montgomery County and from Frederick County on bringing some form of multimodal solution in the area where lanes drop on I-270. And so we've shifted this overall program away from a toll lanes only project into a program that's focused on delivering key priorities for the capital region. And there are several key priorities that the program now includes. That includes a broader focus on transit options and enhancements along the corridor, transit-oriented development opportunities, expanding the bike and pedestrian pathways throughout the entire corridor and in that multimodal study on I-270. The focused approach to the managed lanes, I talked about that being truncated to the areas of greatest needs. And then again, completing that 270 North study to evaluate the range of multimodal opportunities. And through all of this, we're going to make sure that we engage the public throughout the process and actively to make sure that the program's planning is done in a process that leads to success. We know and will continue to engage the community, facility users, and elected leaders on which of the menu of transit choices are most supported for the region. Given that there's a strong desire for everything from the Maryland 355 BRT all the way to options like expanding the new Brunswick line existing service. If any of you listening today did not have the opportunity to weigh in on the program, I'd encourage you to please visit AmericanLegionBridge270.com to view our virtual open house materials and to provide your comments on the program. We are listening. We're trying to adjust the program based on what we're hearing. And so everyone's feedback is really critical to this process. Now, I just want to take a minute to kind of talk about perspectives on our statewide budget. As I'm sure most of you know by now, the Transportation Trust Fund, MDOT's key funding source, is under significant pressure and constraint. Last week, the department released an overview of the final CTP, which outlined the tough decisions that were made to address the over $3 billion funding gap. Despite the budget challenges, SHA will be programmed with nearly $9.3 billion over the next 6 years, which will allow us to continue to move forward with critical infrastructure projects to improve Maryland's transportation system. In that overview, you'll see that construction funding has been removed for all major expansion projects at SHA that will not be advertised by the end of 2023. And that does include $6 million in construction funding for the Maryland 97 Montgomery Hills projects and $68.5 million in construction money for the 495-270 Phase 1 South. While the final CTP does not show construction funding for these major expansion projects, MDOT is committed to advancing design and engineering efforts on these critical infrastructure projects, and that will position us to be able to move forward if funding is available. And the financial impacts are statewide across all modes, and ultimately we have to have a balanced budget. And so these measures were necessary, but our continued efforts in design will position us for future constructions, again, if that funding becomes available. There are not many areas of our capital and operating budget that haven't been impacted by these necessary reductions. We must ultimately tighten our belts a bit to work by and live within our means. Although we're facing these challenging times, that doesn't mean our goals have changed. We'll be poised to leverage every available federal dollar to allow us to be able to continue pushing forward on these critical infrastructure projects, and so that we can deliver safe, reliable, and equitable and environmentally responsible multimodal transportation that connects Marylanders to life's opportunities. And with that, again, I want to thank you for having me at the meeting this morning. I really appreciate the great work of the Chamber in promoting economic development in Montgomery County and ultimately helping Marylanders thrive in our state. And I'm now happy to conclude my remarks and open up to any potential questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, for that comprehensive overview. We appreciate it. So picking up on the last portion of your comments, we have not faced a transportation budget hole like this in many, many decades. We know that transportation funding, Blue Ribbon Commission has been created to look into where to get some more money. We all understand what that kind of process is and what it may lead to. But in the meantime, given the whole you outlined, are you prioritizing projects in such a way to, while we all support bike lanes and such, at the end of the day, the vast majority of the public, of our businesses, they operate on the roads. We're not telling you something you don't know. So is there going to be a shift towards trying to hold on to key highway projects that have been long planned? And in particular, what is your view on moving forward with the new American Legion Bridge, if nothing else?
So two questions there. I'll try to take both in pieces. First, in terms of the prioritization that was outlined in the budget reductions that you've seen. So within SHA and within the department, we've prioritized retaining safety-related projects as a first priority. We don't believe that we can cut safety. I talked about the number of fatal crashes on our roadways and pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. I personally have to meet with the victims of those who have lost loved ones. And if I had a call for all of you to raise your hands, if you personally have known someone who has died on a roadway, I would be willing to bet that everywhere that I've ever done that, everyone sits and thinks about it for a minute and then does recall somebody that they know who has died. And the closer you are to that person, the more it impacts you and the more you recognize the importance of that issue. So safety is at the forefront of all of our minds, and that we really did everything we could to retain the focus on funding to promote safety. And as I mentioned, we do have a $9.3 billion program at State Highway, so we're still doing a lot. Secondly, we have a significant existing system, and we have to preserve our existing assets, right? That's part of safety, is having that holistic view on preserving the system. And so we did have to make some cuts in state of good repair, but we have a robust asset management system, and we believe that we can do certain treatments that are at a lower cost that wouldn't be our desired way of doing it, but they will give us the extension of life as a holding action to get us until a point to where hopefully revenues are infused in a way that will allow us to move forward those projects. And then as a final measure, we made a strong attempt to retain the design, engineering, utility, and right-of-way money on our expansion projects. We understand that oftentimes when I talk about safety, congestion is a driver on fatalities. People, when they sit in congestion, they tend to drive more aggressively. You see a lot more rear ending, side swipes, and other things. And so while shaving 5-10 minutes off of somebody's drive is not our driver here, making sure that we have a promotion of freight mobility, economic development, and helping to promote safety statewide is. And so we recognize the importance of these critical expansion projects and have retained the money to be able to move them forward. The key will be is if we get to that will allow us, whenever we put out any contract, the design and engineering funds allow us to position the project to have contract documents that we can put out for bid and move forward into construction. All of the projects that we had in the program, we kept that money, we're moving them forward, but if the revenues aren't there to support the construction, then they really would feel a delay. And so for the most part, there were very few projects that actually were delayed. A couple of examples of that, the triple bridges in the Baltimore region did have to experience a delay because we were planning to advertise that in the near term. But most of our projects, like the Montgomery Hills project in Montgomery County, we're a few years out to where we still have to progress design and engineering anyway. And as long as there's a revenue infused into the system, then we expect that we will be able to continue to move forward. If the revenues aren't there to help deal with the budget shortfalls, then we will have a challenge where we'll have to continue these discussions with the community and elected leaders to figure out how to set those priorities for the many needs throughout the state, fulfilling transit needs, fulfilling expansion needs, all of that. So hopefully I said a lot there. Hopefully I answered your question. Number one. Your second question was on American Legion Bridge. We are committed to move that forward. As I mentioned, we submitted the grant. We absolutely are relying on a grant at this point to be able to fund the program. In the absence of a grant, the grant also was structured assuming that we would have toll revenues to be able to issue bonds against to be able to support the program. So there is a funding approach for the program, but we're listening to the community input about toll lanes, about how to structure any potential agreements related to toll lanes, and also how to structure the grants. So those things kind of come together to be able to have a package that could allow us to move it forward. But at this point, we have kind of brought a major reset to make sure that we listen fully on the right package for the American Legion Bridge in 270. And that's really what our recent open houses have been about. So I think I hit both your questions, but I'm happy to take any further on that.
So, and also for everybody, just a reminder, if you have a question for Will, down at the bottom under reactions, there's an opportunity down there to raise your hand. While we possibly wait for question, well, I'm gonna offer some perspective as a landowner, developer, real estate person in Montgomery County, and also a Rockville resident. I have very strong concerns about the shift in plan that you all are providing for a number of reasons. While I totally agree that the bridge needs to be addressed, I think stopping at I-270 and 495 at the spur is going to be a tragic mistake, and I'll tell you why. If you've watched anything in the South with the hot lanes at 495 at Tyson's, the Tyson submarket has been choked with traffic for years as a result of lanes stopping at that point. And now bringing the lanes across the bridge, which is desperately needed, and then stopping them at what I consider the Bermuda Triangle of traffic is going to be disastrous because it's going to choke traffic in that region. If you spend any time near I-270, the spur is a mess almost 24/7 at this point, and it's impossible to drive around. So I'm offering that because I don't know that you all have actually given thought to what happens when all that traffic actually arrives at our doorstep. It's been great having it stop in Northern Virginia, and we still are choked here in Maryland, but I worry that you're going to put it all right in the middle of Bethesda. That's one. Two, I am a Rockville resident, and I categorically disagree with our short-sightedness about constantly trying to fight what we desperately need, which are transit lanes. And I wholeheartedly agree with your decision to accelerate the review of the northern part of Montgomery County into Frederick, because that is choking our ability to expand Montgomery County, because if you spent any time on those lanes, either in the morning or in the evening, 2 lanes north is just woefully inadequate. At Clarksburg, it shrinks from 3, below Clarksburg, it's 4. And I'm glad you're accelerating that, but that absolutely needs to be accelerated in a managed lanes kind of way that allows for not just when we talk about transit options like buses, but actual lanes for vehicles. They're not going anywhere. And unless we solve that with MARC or other options, we aren't going to have a lot of mobility in the upper part of the county through Frederick. So I'm glad that piece is going to, be prioritized, because I actually think that's a really much needed piece. I worry now as a Rockville resident that everything between me is going to be totally bottlenecked to the south. And then maybe up to the north, you're going to bring people all the way down towards 370 and nobody's going to have anywhere to go. So my perspective, may or may not agree with everybody on this call, but having studied this and worked with the prior administration, I was excited about the decision to add more lanes. So I'm off my soapbox. Has anybody got a question? But I don't know if you guys have given thought to this, because I don't know where the cars go once you get them here, I guess is my question for you. At 270, at the spur, at 495 at the curve. I mean,
yeah. So I will say, if you don't mind, Mr. Wallace, I'll just address a little bit of a response and then I'll come to you next. So I talked about the areas where there's broad agreement, right? There's broad agreement that we got to deal with an aging bridge. There's broad agreement that when we do, we should provide pedestrian and bike accommodations. And there's broad agreement that as we build out this program, there should be a promotion of transit across the river. That I've frankly heard almost no one that said they don't agree with that. Where it gets dicey, I will say Rockville, the prevalent perspective that we have is that the Rockville area has HOV lanes. It has a collector distributor system. It is wider of a roadway section than the Beltway. And that because of where the choke points are, 495 is a choke point and the 270 North Point location is a choke point, which I think you agree with that, right? That
No doubt.
Those are more important to do first. That's not to say that the region of Rockville should be ignored entirely. There is a desire for transit solutions in that area. Particularly, we've heard improving the New Brunswick line service, improving 355 bus rapid transit. There's a lot of different solutions being talked about there. And in addition, I've had some conversations like with the mayor of Rockville, the new mayor, that there's an interest from the community in having noise walls installed. So, and that might help to define the boundaries of where reasonable construction could be in the Rockville area, that the community wants the noise walls. If you do those first, maybe that might open up the discussion for what is highway segment versus areas for the community. So we're still listening. I would really encourage you, especially if this is an opinion of the larger chamber, send us a letter through I talked about the comment process, get that opinion on record. Even if you do that individually, that's also welcome. But it's important for us to hear all the perspectives. I will say that in my view, the louder voice from the Rockville region has been, this shouldn't be your priority. There's other areas that need it more. Go there first, and then we'll talk, right? So in terms of the terminus of the toll lanes, my background, it was talked about a little bit at the beginning that I was previously the executive director for Maryland Transportation Authority, the state's tolling agency. And under my leadership, we worked on the express toll lanes between Baltimore and Harford County. And those toll lanes, prior to opening, they were, that area in Baltimore County was ranked nationally as one of the worst congestion locations in the state. It was ranked in the state as one of the top 10 bottlenecks. And the opening of the toll lanes completely removed it from all bottleneck lists, helped to open up freight mobility. I think things like Trade Point Atlantic may not have been such the success that it is had I-95 and the Baltimore Beltway been in gridlock through that region as it was historically. And so they work great. However, we have seen, like in that program, where it can only do so much. When you get to a terminus, you're right, you will see, of course, if you don't have the additional widening beyond that point, you're back to where you had congestion. That's going to happen. We understand that. So, we have to have a manageable program. At the end of the day, we're talking order of magnitude, depending on the range of transit options and things that we're talking about, upwards of a $4+ billion program for just what we've been talking about, not even adding, 270 Rockville and other areas. So we have to have something that's actually feasible to move forward. We think we've done that, but we're not pretending that that's going to solve all the problems statewide that are ever going to happen, right? There's lots of examples that I could point to where sometimes you have to deal with this in a managed way. We believe that we've tailored the program to be a managed way that kind of balances the many views that we've heard on the project. So
I'm gonna let Scott get in here. I just want a couple thoughts. One, and it's just happening everywhere. the squeakiest wheels show up and everybody else just expects the fact that everything else is kind of working in the background. And it happens in development. It's happening in the transportation sector. Because we've attended some of your sessions and we see that it's always sort of the squeaky people that kind of constantly do this. And I'll tell you, and I hear what you're saying. I will tell you somewhat selfishly, if this does go forward and you stop it at 270 and the spur, I actually think it might be a good thing, because everybody in Bethesda who doesn't think that we need traffic solutions will start to actually complain about how bad their traffic will be. And it might actually spur the development that we need. It's selfish and it sucks, but you know what? Sometimes the other people need to feel the pain to understand what's going to happen. Get it going, and then we'll end up dropping everybody. And you'll trust me, then Bethesda will rise up in mass and you'll finally get to the need to connect everything up to 370. Scott, you're up.
Thanks. Really appreciate very thoughtful and detailed responses to everyone's questions in your introduction. So just first, a really quick shout out to Kwesi Roodruff, who we work with a lot down here on regulatory comments about development applications. He is super responsive. He definitely has thoughts about how projects should go forward, but just want to recognize that when you talk about responsiveness of the folks who work at SHA, he is definitely a great example of that. So just a shout out for him. But my question is, we talked a lot about the 270, 495 area, but going onto the east part of the county, which for decades has suffered from lack of economic development and lack of good housing growth because of political decisions. Now, with master plan changes, with the potential for FDA and development around there, the east part of the county has a chance to reverse that. And when you talk about equity, that is an area that has been not equitably treated over the years. So what are you seeing for the 29 corridor as far as SHA's priorities, and how might equity play into enhancing the transportation network that SHA has a role in that area? So it's really the 29 corridor is my question.
Yeah, so to give you the latest update specifically on the 29 corridor, I'd probably have to kick it to Derek, but we have been working on a number of initiatives statewide focused on equity. When we look at I mentioned our pedestrian safety action plan, equity was one of the components on how we evaluated the collection of projects to make sure that we are promoting economic development in areas that have historically been disparaged. So, Derek, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, specifically on US 29, but are you able to provide any recent updates on the programs there?
Sure. And first, let me start off. Thank you, Administrator Pines. First, let me start off. Scott, thank you for that comment. I've worked with Quays. He's in our district office, and I've worked with him for probably over 20 years. He's very committed, and I'm sure he'll be elated to hear that feedback from you and the group. So thank you, sir. With the 29 corridor, we had to take a step back. Historically, I know that mobility was the preference, and we were looking at ways to enhance mobility along the corridor. We've received feedback from the community and others, and we know that we have to kind of take a different stance and look at it in a different lens and more from an accessibility standpoint. I can tell you that in the last couple of years, probably since 2001, there's been several spot projects more to the southern end of US 29 where we've installed signals just to enhance accessibility, essentially from 650 South, Oakview and Oakleaf, and Hastings Drive near the YMCA, Four Corners. So we've taken an approach where we know we kind of have to balance mobility, but we, like Administrator Pine said earlier, safety is our utmost priority. So we've kind of shifted gears a little bit, but we're working with the county and local partners in terms of that regional connectivity. We know that that's an economic corridor. So there'll be a lot of partnership going forward in terms of kind of outlining a vision for the US 29 from top to bottom. So that's in progress. I believe we have some meetings coming up. So we'll keep this group in tune about the activity along 29.
Great. I appreciate that it's not definitely on your radar as a chance to help with economic development and growth over there, because it's been ignored for a long time. Not by you necessarily, but thank you.
No, and I should just add, Derek brings up a good point. Montgomery County as a county has been very aggressive in moving forward their Vision Zero program and other projects throughout the county. We have a great partnership with the county, and US 29 is one example where they just recently completed a study on mobility and reliability for that corridor, and we're working closely with them. Sometimes they advance certain projects, sometimes we advance certain projects, but at the heart of it all is trying to work in partnership to be able to do as much as we can together. And we have a great partner in Montgomery County.
Other comments, thoughts, hands? I don't see any hands.
Well, let me just ask, thank you, Bob. This is Gus Bauman again. Let me ask, Will, you've been with MDOT for many years. You've been through good times and bad times. Not to put you on the spot, but that's what I'm doing. What are your thoughts when you look at the budget hole that we are in, both on capital and operating side for MDOT? And then looking at how important and enormous the SHA component is of the entire MDOT program. What practically do you see in the next few years? And you were very helpful in explaining you're not stopping planning and design and all the preliminary studies that need to be made to get a project going. But do you have any thoughts that you may be offering the funding commission that is looking into how to come up with some creative ways to create funds? Do you have any thoughts, given all your experience, about what might be viable in that regard?
So to start on this, this is a national problem. We see even with locally WMATA, right? WMATA is a partnership between DC, Virginia, and Maryland on contributing funds. And you probably read the paper like I have, that Virginia has weighed in on WMATA's fiscal challenges and Maryland's weighed in on it. It's a big challenge for all of us, right? And so when we look nationally at how others have dealt with this, and many have dealt with it already nationally, there's been a lot of differences in how it's been handled. On some folks have tried to curb cost increases by recognizing the realities of where we are and try to reprioritize projects and really have the prioritization process itself lead to fewer projects and making sure that we're only working on certain projects. So, on every balance sheet, right, I'm talking to a group that knows how to do business, right? And you've got your expenses and your revenues. And here we are, I think the Revenue Commission is looking at both sides of that. So prioritization is one piece. That'll be a key factor that the legislature will need to weigh in on, about how we fund projects, which projects specifically merit getting funded. And as the legislature moves forward with their priorities, helping to make sure that when costs are incurred, that we are including the costs and kind of funding them up front going forward. So that's one piece. That's kind of controlling the expenses. On the revenue sides, nationally, it's been handled in many different ways. Some states, North Carolina just passed a straight sales tax increase, and they carved out a specific portion of it was dedicated specifically to transportation. Virginia has that model, but handled more at a local level, where the local governments are empowered to generate their own revenues. There's models that leverage tolling to be able to toll more roads and divert essentially a user fee to fund other elements of transportation. Like, for example, in Pennsylvania, they years back passed what was referred to as Act 44, that essentially increased tolls and took the toll revenues to fund transit projects. And then there's a number of states who have done projects based on mileage-based user fees, where you move away from the gas tax model, which is really struggling as vehicles get more efficient and more electric vehicles come on board. That model is being used in certain locations. It has some challenges with how to deal with collecting revenues across state lines. Today, if somebody stops at a pump, whether they're from Maryland or Virginia, the taxes are collected and it goes into the Transportation Trust Fund. How you collect from a Virginia motorist coming into Maryland and all that's kind of a challenge that needs to be handled more at a national level. And so that's another model that's being looked at. And then finally, there's a lot of discussion about, balancing, encouraging electric vehicle usage with the fees that electric vehicles pay to utilize the roadways. The vehicles are heavier. It's kind of well understood that heavy vehicles induce more damage to infrastructure. And so there's some conversations about how registration fees should be set up for electric vehicles to kind of pay their fair share for use of the roadway. So it is not for me to tell which one of those works best for Maryland. I think as a department, we've just been trying to help educate on what the options are so that our elected leaders can come together and come up with solutions that will look at both expenses. We've already shown one proposal that tightens the belt, and then separately look at revenues as an option for helping to promote transportation. So that's what we've done in the past. As you said, I've been through many cycles of this. And it is something where we've had to tighten the belt in the past. And there's been periods where when revenues are infused, we've had to be ready to go. And I think one of the key things that this administration has done well, based on lessons learned from prior cycles, is that we did decide to keep that engineering money in the program, because typically when revenues are eventually infused, there's a very high expectation to deliver shovel-ready projects. Mm-hmm. And the readiness of a project relies on you've been working on it, right? So the approach that we've taken is the hope is that we will be ready and funds will be there and we'll be able to keep moving. So said a lot. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're at 10:28. Are there any other questions or comments for Administrator Pines?
Can I ask Gus, can I ask quickly? I apologize if I missed it when you were talking about the bridge and 270 project, but you said you're in the process of evaluating the public input and still receiving that. Did you mention a timeline currently for actually, after you've evaluated the input, making a proposal for a project sometime in 2024, or is there any timeline currently or not?
So the timeline is very heavily dependent on the grant application. The application assumed that if we were awarded the grant, we could move forward on a proposal that would address the bridge as soon as 2024, putting out something to bid to kind of regroup following the termination of the prior contract. But again, that schedule is largely going to be driven by funding and whether or not we win that grant.
And that grant you're talking about is a federal grant.
That's correct.
Right, through the federal budget. Stuart, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. If there are no other questions.
Gus and Bob, we have one more.
Oh, go ahead, please.
One last question. I'll be very brief in the interest of everyone's time. I just wanted to ask Mr. Pines, what is your, how does reducing regulatory redundancy between the different agencies, how high does that rank in your sort of priorities or preferences?
So we are having discussions about ongoing regulations and particularly opportunities within the regulations to help deal with some of the revenue gap. The legal and regulatory environment oftentimes is not driven by our decision making, right? Some regulations do induce costs, and so we want to make sure that it's very transparent to everyone what the cost drivers are for us. But there are certain laws that we obviously have to comply with, and our key there is that as laws are passed, we would hope that when there's a fiscal note that says this is going to be a cost impact, that those fiscal notes are addressed through some kind of funding being brought to the table.
Okay, I'll just follow that up by noting that there are a number of regulatory redundancies in Montgomery County, and the industry would certainly love to reduce those. It would help everybody. It would help, the industry, or it would help the agencies, the industry. So would love to work with you on a number of those redundancies.
Yeah, happy to continue the conversation.
Well, again, Will, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. We know you're not busy. But I'll let Bob and Brian and Gigi have a last word before we disperse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gus. And Will, thank you. Despite my criticisms of certain of your programs, I do look forward to working with you and your team and your administration. And hopefully we can get together and I can share some other perspectives with you at another time in a smaller forum. But we do appreciate your time. And as Gus sort of joked, we do recognize that you have a lot on your plate. And we recognize and we truly appreciate the fact that you have been a long steward of the public sector in our state, and 20 years of service or so is not to be it is to be commended, and we do appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gigi, Brian.
Just from a staff perspective, thank you, Will, to you and your team for spending so much time with us this morning and joining our Infrastructure and Land Use Committee. We really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts at the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to chime in just to echo what Gus, Bob, and Brian just said, which is to say thank you very much, Will. We're glad you're in the position you're in, and we're very much appreciate our partnership with you. We're an advocacy organization, so I think we've got lots of work to do together in the coming months and years. So we look forward to working with you. I'd also like to thank all of our members and board members for joining us this morning, and wish everybody happy holidays and see you all soon.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.